With the release of FF7 Rebirth approaching very quickly as of the time I am making this video, I had really no way to play it. I could have theoretically waited for a PC version to come out, but in my estimation, it would take like 6 months to maybe even over a year at bare minimum for a version like that to come out, and I did not want to get spoiled on any story stuff in particular. And you know what? I've managed to avoid the PS quintuple for over 3 years at this point since its release, so I might as well get one now. I really haven't kept up with like traditional console gaming since 2019. I just really haven't been paying attention to like the big AAA stuff or just keeping up with really any of the stuff in gaming outside of FF7 Remake. And when I say traditional console gaming, I've still been playing stuff on the Switch when some of the new big releases come out, but apparently people don't count that console for some reason. So here's my experience using the PlayStation 5 for about 2 weeks as of the time of me filming this video. As someone who has been primarily using PC for the past 5 years, now you're looking at this box here and you're thinking, oh wow, you went with the original model PS5 and not the Slim. That's an interesting choice. Any particular reason for that? Really, I only had 2 choices. I either could get the Slim with no game, or get the OG model with a game for the same price. The tech side of my brain really wanted to get the Slim because, well, it's 125 gigabytes more storage and it's smaller, yada, yada, yada. But the gamer side of my brain ultimately won out because, hey, you're an idiot if you are going to just buy a console when you could just get the same machine with a game. And now that I've bought a PlayStation 5 and I've made a video on it, I'm sure that Sony is going to announce a PS5 Pro or whatever they're gonna call it any day now. All right, with all of that out of the way, let's actually unbox this thing. You know, after making so many videos in a row of just talking about concepts and me having to flash up a bunch of images on the side of the screen, it's actually nice to have like a physical prop for once making a video. Now, I should be a little bit more transparent here. This hasn't been my first rodeo with the PS5, if you know what I mean. I actually had a friend lend me his PS5 when FF7 Intergrade came out, and I got a bunch of footage from that and played it a ton, but I didn't own the console. I only used it to play one game. I had to return it to that friend. So this is really like my first time owning a PlayStation 5. It's my own, it's my games, it's my library. The first thing you'll probably notice about the PS5 is, wow, this thing is pretty big, just having it sit next to me to compare here. But I want to really show you some comparisons to just show how obscenely ridiculous large this console is. Here's the original PlayStation 5 model compared to a base PS4. Here's the original PlayStation 5 model compared to a slim PS3. Here's the original PlayStation 5 model next to a fat PS2. And here is my PS5 compared to the Intel Arc gaming PC that I built. I mean, look at how obscenely huge this thing is in my arms. It's just ridiculous. It borders on parody. If SNL in 2014 had made a parody about the PlayStation 5 and just made this gigantic console to make fun of like how big game consoles were getting, this would be like a hair bit smaller than the parody they would make. Oh, you know what? As I put it on the stand, here's another thing. This console clearly was not designed to lie horizontally. Like, it's extremely, extremely obvious this was only meant to go vertical. I actually learned while I filmed some B-roll for this video how you actually set up the console horizontally properly, because it's a little unintuitive that the stand, you actually have to rotate the little back clippy part so that way it could sit down properly, and not like this, which, yeah, not a good idea. Now, as for the actual design of the console itself, I don't know, man, I actually kind of like it. Yes, I know. Obviously, the digital version is the one that they intended to design. They slapped the disc drive on, and they, you know, it's just this awkward thing that kind of juts out. But in my opinion, I actually kind of like that. I like the little bit of the asymmetry going on with the disc PS5. The digital version just is like a little too clean for my liking. It just looks like a gigantic Wi-Fi router. Having the disc drive makes it actually look way more like a game console, weirdly enough. And the addition of the disc drive makes the horizontal orientation of the PS5 not look as incredibly stupid, whereas if you did it with the digital edition, it just looks really, really, really dumb. This console also gets really, really hot. I actually had to change out the HDMI cable while I had the console turned on, and this thing actually spits out a concerning amount of heat for a video game console. For a PC, the amount of heat isn't concerning spitting out the back, but for a game console, makes me a little concerned. Now, I have completed the PS4 to PS5 save transfer function, although only really for the save games and like one other game. The rest of the games, I can just re-download, because basically that's what it does anyways. It just re-downloads the game. And I have a bunch of PS4 discs that I could just reinstall on this thing anyways. The main reason why I hadn't just reinstalled everything onto this is I wanted to give this console some space for when Rebirth comes out, in case, you know, it needs 300 gigabytes to install for some reason. Now, I've been playing my PlayStation 5 mostly on an LG C10 OLED, and man, that's a fantastic gaming experience. The blacks are pitch black. The image just looks so sharp and clear. Low input lag, so games actually feel pretty responsive on here too. Obviously, OLEDs are way more high-end than the console gamer demographic is probably going to spend on a TV, but man, this device just really, really works well with an OLED. Using that TV also allows me to use all of the new visual features on the PS5, so VRR, 120 Hz, 1440p. Really the only thing that's missing is 8K, obviously. Now, I have tried the PS5 on a normal 1080p LCD, but it really feels like a massive waste. I'd almost compare it to like using a PS3 on a CRT. Like, yes, it's obviously an intended use case that Sony did design and account for, but why would you? That I feel like you're losing a lot of like what you paid for in the console. Although, I don't know, maybe that might be the wrong call, considering how AAA game developers just absolutely seem intent on destroying their image quality with FSR2 and ruining an entire generation of games visually. Maybe a 1080p LCD might actually be the smart move for the PS5 in the long run. Now, I've really only been playing like 3 things on PS5, right, as of right now, so I haven't really gone out and like tested all of the new features of the machine quite yet. Now, using this console actually gives me a little bit of whiplash, but that's not a bad thing, because I've been PC gaming for so long and I've just been so in the trenches with that. Man, it's just so nice that I turn on the PS5 and stuff just works. After personally having used Intel Arc on and off for about a year, just dealing with all that driver nonsense, it feels like a small miracle that I can just go back to a gaming device and not have to worry about literally any of that. But even compared to my main PC with my 6800 XT, which has way less graphical jank going on, the PS5 just still feels like such a sigh of relief by comparison. Perfect example is how this console handles HDR. You can have HDR toggled off, you can have it auto toggle on depending on if a game supports it, or you can have it do this weird sort of tone mapping thing when you turn it on. On PC, it's much more of a nightmare. Obviously, you have a similar kind of HDR toggle in Windows, but actually getting a game to like boot up in HDR or turn on HDR is just such a nightmare. It works differently from game to game. Sometimes you have to have HDR off as a setting on your display, and then the game will go into HDR. Sometimes it's in the menu. Sometimes there's no toggle, so you just have to toggle it in Windows and hope that your game will show up in HDR. Oh. Obviously, I've been playing a ton of the FF7 Rebirth demo, and I'll be playing a ton of Rebirth when it comes out in about a week here from when I'm filming this video. But that's a whole other discussion for another time. I also keep forgetting that this console is also a PS4 Pro, effectively. So a lot of those mid or late gen PS4 games that developers never went back and made PlayStation 5 versions of, you just get like a free upgrade to UHD if you get a PS5, if you've never owned a Pro, so that's pretty cool. All right, so here's a perfect example of the PS5 as a PS4 Pro. This game is Dark Souls 3. Now, Dark Souls 3 was originally a PS4 game, and it got a PS4 Pro patch to where it uncapped the frame rate up to about 60 FPS, but can never reach 60 FPS on PS4 Pro due to a CPU bottleneck. And so the PS5 version running the PS4 Pro patch can now reach 60 FPS
locked. Now, I know a lot of PC gamers are going to scoff and laugh at this idea because PCs just naturally do this, that when you insert a new architecture of CPU into your motherboard, that your maximum frame rate will go up. But in the context of like a purely backwards compatibility standpoint in the console space, this is actually very mind-blowing to watch the max frame rate of a game go up without any real software changes.
Now the SSD, I am very, very impressed by the couple games I've played. Everything just loads up incredibly, incredibly quick. It just totally transforms the way that you play games, that you just don't have to wait for super long load times or anything. That you could just kind of take a breath and the load screen will be that long because the developers are like, okay, that's how long the load screen needs to be so the player can, take a breather. Now, from a PC gamer perspective, obviously I have an NVMe and I have games installed on it, but there's really like no definitive standard yet that everybody has adopted, at least of the AAA games. So it still might be like 2-3 years before everything on PC is like the PS5. The only game I haven't been able to try out yet is Spider-Man 2. And the reason why, one, I haven't played Miles Morales, even though I played the first Spider-Man game, so I obviously need to catch up there. But the other reason is just, I'm just kind of in the middle of a lot of things personally, so I already kind of am in enough games right now as is, plus other video making projects and life stuff. Spider-Man 2 might be something I'm going to play maybe later in 2024 rather than right now when I just got the console, especially with FF7 Rebirth like right around the corner. And the PS5 game that I've played the most is Demon's Souls. Man, this game is just so obscenely good that it's a modern launch title. We don't get launch titles this good ever anymore. So I'm surprised that this game came out in 2020 and not like now in early 2024. Obviously, it's a Souls game, so if you've played any of those before, it's not that different. There definitely are a couple of structural changes in how the game works that might throw you off if you're more used to sort of the Dark Souls style. I myself am a very casual Souls player. I've now played, I think, every From Software Souls game aside from Elden Ring. But I only do one playthrough. I don't really go through. I don't do any of the online stuff. I just kind of treat it as like a fun 40 to 60 hour single player adventure with some hard difficulty, some fun boss battles, leveling up, etc. In fact, Demon's Souls PS5 is a really good showcase of the new features of the PlayStation 5, even outside of graphics. One example is the haptics in the controller. When your weapon strikes and hits something, it creates this little vibration in the controller. And so you're just constantly engaged on a micro level physically with the game feel. Just having that extra little thing that would have been really annoying if your controller rumbled every time you swung your sword and hit into an enemy on, like, say, DualShock 4. But using this, it just feels so natural and really connects you way more with the game feel. And I couldn't imagine playing another Souls game without it. Another great example is HDR. Souls games obviously do that thing where they hide enemies around corners to try to get some cheap shot kills, make sure that you're really prepared anytime you go into an area. But with HDR, allowing the darkness to really go down to black compared to the rest of the image allows enemies to hide in the dark better than I think any other Souls game has. I want to take a little side tangent here to kind of talk about the Dualsense specifically, because I feel like this controller has been a much larger percentage of the PlayStation 5 experience than I thought it would be, especially having played 7 Remake Integrate a bunch on this controller when I borrowed my friend's PS5. That actually having a game that can fully utilize this controller, I think this is like the big winner of this console. This controller is just so comfortable and so fantastic, but I can't really definitively say yet that it is my favorite first-party controller. Right now, for any PC games I use the DualShock 4 with the back button attachment, and that's kind of my favorite controller to use right now. It's really a tie between that and the Switch Pro controller as my favorite controllers. I can't really pick one over the other. They both have things that the other controller doesn't. It doesn't have everything kind of wrapped up all into that one package. But the DualSense, I think, manages to take everything I like from the Switch Pro controller, everything I liked from the DualShock 4, and combine it into like the perfect game controller. DualSense even fixes a problem that I've had with a lot of controllers over the past decades, especially PlayStation controllers, which a lot of other controllers just make L1 and R1 extremely small and tiny, and they just feel terrible to push. And this controller, they feel as important as they should be compared to everything else on the controller. Really, I think I'm gonna have to wait until I fully beat a game with this controller in order to definitively say if it's my favorite of all time or anything like that. So anyways, guys, that's it for the video. Do any of you guys own a PS5 by chance? I'm just curious. Maybe talk about it in the comments or something. Describe your experience with the console, maybe games you're playing, things like that. Leave a like if you liked this video. Subscribe if you want to see more content like this from me. Hit a Patreon so you can help support me making more videos like this on topics that I love and deeply care about. Anyways, that's it, and have a good day.